Welcome to the Mason Guard Show. Unscripted, uncensored, unapologetic. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mason Guard Show. We have a special episode for you today as we are premiering a new feature coming to the show. This is called On the Spot Top 5. Give you a basic rundown of how it works. Before the show, we pulled from a list of topics, basically we have about 5 minutes before the show to prepare our top 5 list, each separately from one another. So I don't know what Ed has. Ed doesn't know what I have. And we're going to go into this, and we're going to go through each spot, giving about 5 minutes to talk back and forth and try to decide which one really deserves that spot on the list. And then when we get to the end with our 5 that we've kind of picked, then we're going to look and see if maybe we want to move any of those around to kind of get our definitive list. Of course, with this lack of preparation, when I say definitive list, that's really a misnomer, because, of course, we didn't necessarily have a chance to scour everything in this regard. So, sometimes we may miss some of our personal favorites and things of that as we go through, but we thought that's what might make this a little bit more interesting. So, before today's show, the topic that we drew, we put in just some broad ones to start, because we want you guys to get a sense of who we are and some of our personal favorites. So, today's topic is going to be our top 5 personal favorite television shows. Obviously, this is a huge topic because there have been thousands upon thousands upon thousands of television shows out there. But really, the truly great ones, certainly seem to rise to the top. And Ed and I have, certainly discussed this topic at length even before this podcast began. But I think we're going to have some interesting conversations as we look through as to what makes a great television show. So Ed, what about you? What do you generally look for in a good television show before we get started here?
So, I personally love comedies, anything that can make me laugh. But I also, when we drew this topic, I had to really think about how I'm going to decide what I would choose, like what the list is going to be. And with that, I kind of chose, if I could only watch these shows again, what would I choose to only be able to watch from now on?
The Desert Island
That's
5.
right. That's
Okay.
kind of what I went with.
Okay. You know what? I may not have actively done that, but as I look at my list, I think absolutely is probably 4 out of the 5 would make my Desert Island top 5. My number 5 spot's the one probably not. So let's jump right into it then and go with our number 5 spot.
Number 5.
So mine, as I say, probably again not my Desert Island one, but a show that has absolutely just taken me with its originality and unique story. And I laugh a little bit because I would never have watched this show if it wasn't for you personally, Ed, and that is Netflix original The OA.
That is a good choice, and it's funny I didn't even think of it because what a creative show that is.
It's so unique. For those of you who haven't watched it, I can't summarize this show, and that was kind of how Ed sold me on this. It's so hard to explain what it is, because the show constantly takes a turn. Just when you think you've got a grasp on what's happening, it will absolutely take a 90-degree turn and go into new territory. And that, to me, is honestly the brilliance of the show, is there's no predictability to this, It's such a unique take, and I mean, going right up to the end of season 2, I'm not going to spoil anything because of how much I love this show, and I think it is something that you need to experience yourself without anything spoiling.
Yeah.
But like right to that, even this last few minutes of that last second season that just came out a few months ago. Wow. It absolutely, again, just when I thought, okay, I think I finally know where this story is going, it completely pulled the rug over. What's the phrase I'm looking for? The rug over my eyes. And did that. So sorry, I've taken up a lot of the 5 minutes here. What's your number 5 spot there?
Okay, before we go on, I need to talk about The OA because I gotta say I respect that choice. It was not on my list, but the first time I saw that show, if you haven't watched it, the first episode, the first 40 minutes is kind of giving you a story, which you think you have a handle on.
Yeah,
then,
girl goes missing. 7 years later, returns.
yeah,
She was blind
right.
when she went missing.
And
Sight suddenly back.
yeah,
That's, I guess,
exactly.
the basic
That's the
premise
premise.
that you give.
Yeah, so you kind of think you have like, okay, I have an understanding of the show. And again, because it came out on Netflix, there was no advertisement for this show, so I watched it purely as a random, like, let me give this a go. I'm kind of half watching it, and then halfway through the show, it basically restarts and starts telling a completely different,
Mhm.
unique story. And again, this show is beautifully made. The cinematography is incredible.
Unreal.
The
Some of the
music is amazing. So
Mhm.
if you haven't watched that, watch it. Okay. Now because I did a desert island list, I decided to throw my number 5 as a show that there is tons of. It's been going on forever.
Doctor Who.
No, no.
No.
I chose Saturday Night Live.
Oh,
Now
okay.
I threw that as my number 5 because of how many episodes there are. That there's music, including musical artists every week, comedians, famous people. You know how many people have hosted, how many people have been a part of that show, the skits. How you can actually use that show to talk about different timepieces, how it's very political, and you get to actually watch a progression from that show. So if you started watching from whenever it started, 20, 30 years ago, however, and that's probably even not enough.
70s?
Yeah, so 40 years ago. There's so much of it and so much amazing content, like Jane, you ignorant slut. Just I'm gonna leave it there, but all those
Cheeseburger.
amazing.
Cheeseburger.
Exactly. So I put Saturday Night Live in my number 5 spot.
All right, all right. I can respect that pick. There was certainly a time in my life where every Saturday night I was glued to my television for that hour and a half. But I mean, my argument for this is if you want to look at percentage of quality, there's some rough, not just like episodes, but years of
Yes,
that show that you would just be suffering through. And I think, there's not a bad episode of the OA, and there are full bad seasons of Saturday Night Live.
that's true. But if you looked at the amount of good quality that is in all of Saturday Night Live, if you're on a desert island, you've got years of content to watch.
I feel like I would just watch the Farley years.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be wrong. If you didn't enjoy living in a van down by the river, you're wrong.
Just wrong.
Yeah, you're just wrong.
That's
You didn't get it.
absolutely wrong. One of the
But
all-time
Will
greats.
Ferrell, David Spade, John Belushi,
Even the Fallon, Tina
f-
Fey.
oh, amazing time. So if you can, a lot of the jokes that you hear today were created by those people. A lot of the storylines, the characters, the creativity came from Saturday Night Live. So as far as long-standing TV shows, I believe it earned a spot on my list.
Okay. So there we go. We got about a minute left of our 5 minute kind of block here. So how are we going to decide here? As I say, I think to me that percentage of quality really does mean a lot there. And again, when was the last time SNL was truly relevant? I mean, again, there have been sketches here and there. The Alec Baldwin, Donald Trump, I guess, is maybe about it. But before that, you have to go back to what, Lazy Sunday?
Yeah,
fair
enough.
Right?
But like the Saturday Night Live shorts are amazing.
I think you're just there's too much history. I think for you is what you're again, it just hasn't been that same quality.
So I mean,
years.
if we're gonna look at quality of actual production in TV show, I'm gonna say the OA is an amazing choice. Does that take away from what Saturday Night Live is? No, but
no.
Do I appreciate what the amazing story that the OA told? I can't disagree with you.
All right, I feel I'm going to take this point then. That's going to give me the OA at number 5. All right, so let's go with number 4 then. What did you got for number 4?
Number 4, I put another sort of comedy. I put Futurama.
Ooh,
I
okay.
put it's weird to put a cartoon on this list, but if you've ever watched Futurama from start to finish, so much creativity, so many interesting ideas, so much humor that really struck a chord with me. And then the way that they summarized the show at the end. If you haven't seen it, I don't know if I want to ruin it for you, but there were ideas that they put into the very beginning of the show that they waited years to share with you. at the end.
My favorite is, again, when I learned that, again, in that very first episode of the show, you see Nibbler's shadow pushing Fry, which is a reveal, I think, in season 3 or 4 of the show, when that finally comes back around, and it's like the foresight to put that in, and then the patience to sit on it.
Because they got
for
canceled.
as long as they did.
They got canceled before they even shared that piece of the story. So it was after a recovery of the show that they actually got to bring that idea back. Like, that's why I gave that show, like, for creativity for the time, I believe it earned that number 4 spot.
All right, good pick. All right, for my number 4, I also went with a comedy. Now, this one I think is going to be a bit of a tougher one to argue, because I know this is one you haven't watched a lot of, and that's Arrested Development. The absolute sheer, it is the ultimate, cast, what's the word I'm looking for? Ensemble cast, where just you have everyone who's in that show is at the absolute peak of their powers. I love Will Arnett and just about anything he does, but nothing will ever beat Job. Job is one of the all-time greatest television characters when it comes to just pure comedy. Everything he says is funny. It's not a trick, Michael. It's an illusion. Tricks are something whores do for money. Is just one of those lines that says it sticks with you forever and ever and ever. So to me, I just think the sheer wit of it, and also similar to Futurama, it's one that has jokes that pay off years down the road. There's a character who turns out to be a mole, and the first time you see him, he is literally wearing a t-shirt with a mole on it. And again, that's 2 seasons later before you find out that that's why that was. And again, just I think there's some sheer brilliance there when it comes to Arrested Development. I will say the knockdown against mine certainly does come into the 4th and 5th seasons, which weren't as strong as the originals. But again, I just think they were still better than 98% of other sitcoms on the air.
So I'll admit, I never watched this show from start to finish, and I think that's why I don't have the appreciation for it that you do.
It is very much a story.
Yeah,
show.
I think that, it's actually on my list of things to start, like, actually watch in its entirety, just to understand it. I think that my problem with this show is the same thing that what people love about it. I just find that Jason Bateman is Jason Bateman in everything that he does. I haven't found, though I'll give him credit for his most recent production, which is The Ozark. No, it's not on my list, of course, but it's a quality show, but it's Jason Bateman in a bad situation being Jason Bateman.
It is still Jason Bateman being Jason Bateman.
And I don't believe that his character is any different from Arrested Development than he is in Ozark. He's just in a different situation. When he was in what was the superhero movie he did with Will Smith? Hancock. But it was just Jason Bateman in a different situation.
You're not wrong. He's just really, really good at being Jason Bateman.
Yeah.
And I think the Jason Bateman character that he has cultivated certainly has its charms and its appeal. So, all right, I guess we're running out of time real quick. I'm not going to argue. Futurama is so tough to argue against. Yeah. It really is one of the greatest. It's got the heartwarming, whether it's the episode about his brother or his dog. Yeah. It's got it all. So I can't argue against Futurama. As much as I love Arrested Development, I don't think it can beat the animated superstar there.
Yeah.
So I'll give you that one.
Yeah.
All right, number 3. I am still sticking with comedies, and I know I just called Arrested Development one of the best ensembles, but this to me is the best ensemble of them all in the comedy world, and that is Community.
Oh, so this is a hard argue for me because I did love Community. Now, so funny. Mm-hmm. Everyone in this show really brings their A game, I found. I loved it. I loved it all the way through. Even though, what was it, the 4th season?
It goes off the rails. The gas leak year, as they call it.
And then, Danny Glover left the show. Donald Glover, pardon me. Yeah, Donald Glover.
Danny Glover is Lethal Weapon.
That's right. Yeah, Donald. When he left the show, I think it left a big gap, and I think it spun a lot of the characters and the writing, and I just felt that it was, it just lost its charm. And then I think the last season was like crowdfunded or something of that nature.
The Amazon pickup.
That's right. So I did love that show. I love, if it had ended at 3 seasons, I think I would have loved it even more. I just
Yeah.
found that the end of that show didn't hold.
It didn't quite hold the same level.
Right.
It's hard for me to disagree. Again, season 4 literally called the gas leak year
Yeah,
by themselves in the next year by
that's
saying like
right.
we're sorry for that year.
Yeah.
It wasn't great. And you're not wrong with Donald Glover being gone. I think the person who suffered the most was Danny Pudi's Abed.
Yeah.
Because the two of them were such probably one of the greatest duos in television history as far as chemistry,
Mhm.
comedic timing. The two of them were just perfect together. And when Donald Glover left the show, Danny Pudi is still amazing, still very funny. The Abed character is personally my favorite on the show, but it wasn't quite the same, and they had to come up with more and more fantastical stuff for him to do, and I think that's where we lost things. But again, I'm taking all the time. What do you have for number 3?
Yeah. So my number 3, completely opposite end of the spectrum.
Okay.
It would have been nice if we like sort of had a chance to line these up, but that would take away from this overall experience.
It's got the point.
My number 3 was Breaking Bad.
Ooh.
So if you haven't seen this, and I'm sure most of the people listening have probably seen this show, the way this show plays out is amazing. It's intense and it's creative and it was edgy. And you really got stuck with the story. Bryan Cranston portrays this like amazing character who goes from the spectrum of good to bad, and that's really what
Mhm.
that story's about. And Aaron Paul really played this amazing duo with him as well, and their interactions
Fantastic, really.
was incredible. It was a story about meth and family and overcoming challenges and facing your sort of demons and a really dark and gritty story in general. So that got my number 3 spot.
I can certainly see why. One of the things I really appreciated was I think it was the first time I've really seen a story where it takes your protagonist and turns them into the antagonist throughout the
Absolutely.
course of the show. And I hadn't seen quite anything do that with
Mhm.
not nearly with as effective as the way they told this story. And I think everyone has that different point when you start to turn against Walter
Mhm.
in the show, and so it's everyone's got these different breaking points along the line. Mine's probably the most common, which is certainly when he just watches Jesse's girlfriend die. That to me was the point of no return. And like, yeah, up until then he kind of had Jesse's back, but it was when he, you know, took his own happiness over Jesse's that it's like, no, you have now passed the line that I was okay with.
Yeah, I remember there's a scene, I think it's in the first season, where he gets, and it all happens pretty quickly in the show, where he gets super aggressive with his wife in one scene, and it made me immediately feel uncomfortable with him, but it still made me want to know where this story was going, and
Hmm.
then the relationship with other characters throughout the story, and the introduction of some very dark bad guys, where even though your protagonist sort of is the bad guy, the people he's dealing with are even worse and dark, and just how the story plays out is incredible. And then like the spin-off Better Call Saul, and the character of Saul was very interesting and like engaging, and like
For
yeah
me, like Bob Odenkirk has always been a comedic actor,
yeah
and so to see him take on that role was really interesting for me, and I'm impressed at how much I forgot Bob Odenkirk's rest of his filmography
yeah
once I actually got into the character of Saul. So yeah, that's certainly something to be said there. So oh man, it pains me that Community might not make this list, but I can't argue with your Breaking Bad pick there.
yeah
That's a great pick. Yeah, another one where again you struggle to find bad episodes of that show.
Exactly, and I don't want to take away from Community, but Breaking Bad's just this amazing ride from start to finish that didn't really miss for me. So when I consider Community, if we're talking about the first 2 seasons of Community, you might have me, but
Yeah.
the entirety of Community, I'd say I would choose Breaking
That
Bad.
that's fair. If I may, I just recently learned this story, and so I have to throw it in since we are talking about Community.
Mhm.
It's the Russo brothers, who are now famous because they've done the Avengers movies most recently, and they started with the Captain America um, Winter Soldier movie. they got the audition or the meeting to meet about that movie because of their directing of the paintball episodes of Community. Those three
That's
episodes
incredible.
specifically
Yeah.
is why Kevin Feige and Disney called them in to discuss, hey, would you maybe like to take on Captain America? And so I
Wow.
love that fact, because if you've watched Community, odds are at least one of the paintball episodes is on your top 5 list.
Yeah, just just such a great story. Like very, like it's like an epic within a small comedy. Yeah.
Whether it's just the one-off first episode in the first season or the two-parter in the second, just simply fantastic. And again, if you haven't watched it, please just go watch the first 2, probably 3 seasons of Community, and you won't regret it. All right, so moving on to number 2. Why don't you start us off with number 2?
So number 2, this is a personal favorite of mine. I grew up with this show. It still drives content. It tries to be edgy and yet aimed at families. Another animated classic, The Simpsons.
Ooh, The Simpsons. Okay. Hit me with your argument, or should I give mine?
So, I as much as I don't want to in this scenario quote Family Guy, not Family Guy, South Park.
Counterproductive.
What hasn't The Simpsons done?
The Simpsons has done it.
They hit every topic. They hit so many different ideas. The Simpsons movie, just years and years and years. How many seasons has The Simpsons done? So many.
25
Again,
now,
somewhere in that ballpark. Constantly funny, constantly creative. They created an entire community that stories follow different people. I'm not going to take out that there's been like wildly racist moments throughout it, which
they've at least had the decency to tackle as
exactly.
well. Maybe not always well, but at least they're not afraid to shy away from that. So
yeah,
credit where it's due.
Things that that whole area of The Simpsons predicting it and people thinking that Groening is
terrifying.
Is a time traveler. I think that's it's probably way off base, but what hasn't the Simpsons touched on? There's so much content there, and if we're talking Desert Island Desert Island TV shows, this is again fell on my list because I know that even the early seasons were funny for me. There's one scene when this one this is the first time in a TV show, and I remember this being a kid, that I laughed so hard I fell off the couch I was watching. It's a scene, I can't remember the full episode, but for whatever reason, Homer's in the bathtub and Bart comes in and breaks a chair over him in the bath. And I laughed so hard. Like, I remember just dying laughing. And that was one of the first times that a TV show really made me fall in love with it, and that's why I say that Simpsons deserves a spot on this list.
All right, I'll admit I certainly do have the nostalgia for The Simpsons, but I gotta say on this one I think you're dead wrong, because my pick is absolutely just simply one of the best dramas of all time, and that's Battlestar Galactica.
Oh,
and I know you're a fan of this one, so it may be a tough one for you to argue against.
Okay.
But simply, again, when it comes down to one of those shows where you put yourself in the shoes of the character and having to make the tough decisions that they make, and I've never seen a show that makes tougher decisions than Battlestar Galactica, whether it's some of those choices that Laura Roslin has to make as the president, or Adama has to make as the leader of the military. There's just so much to it, and again, you have so many great characters throughout that show whose stories you can get interested in, and even if not every single character is someone for you, there is someone on that ship that you're going to identify with, whether it's the simple chief, down in the pilot deck, who was someone for me personally. I always loved Chief as a character, or the old man, Bill Adama, simply one of the greatest leaders of all time. Like, if you give me a choice of what TV couple I want to be my parents, it's Bill Adama and Laura Roslin. Like, I can't even, I look at those two and they are simply just an example of leadership to me. And again, I go with, there are 3 bad episodes of Battlestar Galactica. there are at least 3 bad seasons of The Simpsons once again. So I think again, if I'm going to look at a percentage basis, The Simpsons again. I haven't watched an episode of The Simpsons and enjoyed it since the movie. Like that's a long time now. I think that's been almost a decade since that Simpsons movie, 2007. I want to say, if I'm guessing, man.
Somewhere in that area.
Right. So again, you can say, yeah, The Simpsons did it, but by that point, now we're just running repeats on their own things. Every quote you remember from The Simpsons is from the first 10 years, and after that, it's just a wasteland.
Yeah. Okay. So I love Battlestar Galactica. I'm just going to argue that if you haven't watched the one that started in 1978, if we're going to take that into consideration
No.
for bad episodes,
that is not at all what I'm talking about. You can't loop in that crap into my argument. I simply mean the reimagined Battlestar Galactica.
All right.
You can't tie that in.
Okay, so from a dramatic story, there are some scenes in Battlestar Galactica, and we've talked about this show before, because I remember when I think about that show, the 33-second jumps.
Yep.
Now, I remember that being like later in the show, but you reminded me that's in the
second episode of the show.
If you've not watched this episode and you want to see something tense, the fate of humanity is resting on these people's shoulders, and they are losing, and they continue to lose throughout the whole story.
The whole run of the show
is dire.
It is, yeah.
And I love that show. I know I'll watch it again. Will I ever watch the entirety of The Simpsons? If you listen to our episode about streaming recently, and you know that it'd eventually be on Disney's sort of repertoire, you'll know that chances are you will watch some of The Simpsons again.
Yeah, and I would like
the
to say first 10 seasons, and then you'll ignore the last 15.
Yeah, I also
seasons.
don't watch The Simpsons regularly, so I'm gonna give this one to you.
That's right.
BSG is a great show.
Yep.
Amazing content. Super creative. You don't even know who your bad guy is for so long, although you think you do. So. Yeah, I'll give you BSG.
See that one. All right, perfect. Yep. All right, and that brings us to our number 1 spot. So
I'm very concerned we're both going to have the same choice. I'm very concerned.
Yeah, all right. Actually, I think that is a possibility because once again, I know you and I have discussed my number 1 pick before as a great show. So I'll allow you the honors, though, if you want to.
So my number 1 TV show, something that I've watched in its entirety, I'm going to say at least 5 times.
I don't think we've got the same then.
Oh, if not, probably approaching more because it is a regular show for me, is The Office. We're talking about the American version, although I don't take away credit from Ricky Gervais and his version of The Office that spurred this amazing American version. The Office is a love story. It's a comedy. It has it's a dialogue rich, creative show based on virtually nothing. Right through to the end, I can watch every episode, barring a few that I skip over, and we'll talk about those another time.
I know one of those.
Yeah. Scott's Tots is just is a no-go for me. I just can't. It's just too awkward.
I can't miss that episode.
But the thing about that episode is they made something so awkward that it makes me uncomfortable watching a comedy from my home, and I just need to skip it, which is a creation all in itself. So many funny people, people who kind of didn't really have a career. Obviously, you've got some people in the show who were amazing comedians beforehand and amazing careers beforehand, but some of the lead characters who you just absolutely fall in love with. Dwight, just such a great character, great writing, and I love that show, and that's my number 1 spot.
That's a great pick. It is, and again, it's perennially on my Netflix. Mm-hmm. So it's tough to argue against, but I think I'm going to, because that's the point of this show. And I'm not going with a comedy, which again, normally I do love comedies, but again, when it comes to just sheer quality of television, for me, there's nothing greater than The West Wing. This show, if you want to talk dialogue, no show has ever touched The West Wing in terms of dialogue. You've got just so much sharp, witty, walking down the hall conversations that happen at such a quick pace. And when you look at the cast that show had, again, not necessarily a ton of known people when you had like Bradley Whitford, who had done like an Adam Sandler movie, I think, at that point. You had Allison Janney, who again hadn't done a lot. She's gone on to a great career ever since. You had Richard Schiff. I think the only real big names in that show, it was of course Martin Sheen as the president, and then Rob Lowe, who certainly had a career in there. And again, just Rob Lowe has done some fantastic stuff. Nothing better than his character Sam Seaborn in The Office, or in The West Wing. Now you got me mixing up with your show. So just to me, again, whether it's the heart, like the first episode after 9/11, where you have the president talking to a group of kids. There's just so much I could talk about with this show. So to me, as much as I love The Office, and again, you're right, there's not necessarily a bad episode. Scott Stotts, I love. West Wing was just so much more important, and I think it's a show that anyone can get behind, and look at. You're not necessarily going to be able to follow it. I had someone when I watched who was actually helping me understand the American political system, and I think that helped me a little bit. But I don't think it's necessary. I think again, the weight and the impact of what's happening is not lost on anyone. It's simple enough that anyone can feel impact from those words. And we look at Martin Sheen and go, that's who the world would love to have as a president.
Oh, absolutely, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
So The West Wing's amazing. I can't take away from that. There's some amazing tense moments. Amazing writers. And the delivery of those scripts is incredible. Some really special moments that show created. But I'm not going to say, I'm going to ask you this question. How many times have you watched The West Wing?
Once.
How many times have you watched The Office?
Probably about 5, 6, 7.
Right there. And will you watch The Office again?
Yes.
Are you watching
Probably
The Office
tonight.
right now?
2 episodes before I came over here.
That's right. I rest my case. What's going to be on my TV this week? Probably an episode of The Office. Am I going to endeavor to watch The West Wing again from the start? Maybe, but not right now. And I'll probably have watched The Office twice again before I watch The West Wing.
Oh, but nothing will make you feel like The West Wing, man. Like, I just don't know. From the president and his suffering with MS, I think it is, which the MS Society actually came out and said, like, thank you for probably the best portrayal of this condition ever put on film, which I think that speaks volumes as well. There's just so much to it. You certainly do have an argument, though, about when it comes to rewatchability. I don't think anything touches The Office. I love me some Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but I don't think even it comes close.
I'm surprised that didn't make our list.
There was actually a pretty good... Yeah. It was debated at the 5 spot there. Mm-hmm. And I can't argue with you. You're going to break my heart, but the rewatchability argument is way too strong on that one. You're absolutely right. I have not watched The West Wing since I watched The West Wing. I feel I would. I absolutely would. If someone said, hey, let's watch The West Wing right now, I'd absolutely start that up again. But again, you're right. For the pure legacy, I mean, I think The Office is single-handedly what keeps Netflix afloat. They don't need anything else on there. They could just have The Office.
I've literally referred to Netflix as my Office subscription, and I'm prepared to keep paying. You know?
All right. So there we are. We've got our top 5 list. Let's run through what we've got, and we'll see if maybe we want to play around with any order or anything like that. I don't know. I feel we may be pretty good. So at number 5, we have The OA. Number 4, Futurama. Number 3, Breaking Bad. Number 2, Battlestar Galactica. And topping out the top of our list, Michael Scott and The Office. How do you feel?
I feel good about it. I mean, it's interesting to me that like we didn't even get to touch on some amazing shows like The Wire, The Sopranos.
Absolutely.
Some shows that probably do earn their spot, and that's why I wanted to mention them. But the shows that we have on that list, I will watch again.
And again.
You know, and now that we've talked about Battlestar, I'll probably give that a go again. You know, like, so I
You
think,
won't regret it.
I
You
think
really won't.
the order on our list is really good. I'm happy with that list. Again, you know, we only spent 5 minutes putting together our list today, just so we could have this conversation. But you know, I like where everyone finished on that list.
Absolutely. I think that does look pretty good to me. Of your ones that didn't make it, which one would you probably want to argue would still finally make a spot? Who would you want to make a...
You know, I know that there's tons of bad content from The Simpsons, but you know what? I'm happy with Futurama nailing that. So you know, everything I conceded,
Yeah.
I'm really low about, yeah.
Yeah, I can't lie. It hurts to see both West Wing and Community off of this list. But again, I look at what we do have on there, and it is tough to argue. I think Futurama is actually probably one of the most underrated shows. For those who aren't deep fans, it's just a misunderstood show. And if anyone actually did take the time to sit down and watch that start to finish, they'd realize there certainly is a lot of brilliance in there. So, wow. All right. I think we have our top 5 lists. So that's going to bring an end to our special episode of On the Spot Top 5. Thank you guys once again for tuning in. This has been the Mason Guard Show. Let us know what topics you'd like us to debate in future top 5s, and we will see you in the next one.